Trauma. Everyone has it. No one talks about it. It seems easier to stay silent, ignore it, or stuff it than it does to honor it, learn from it, and finally heal. Trauma is debilitating, yet so often we suffer in silence. Trauma is not meant to be battled alone, and we are no longer going to suffer in silence. Together, we are creating a safe place to speak, to share our stories, and grow our strength as we heal. Together, we are giving a voice to those who have been silenced, bringing darkness into light, and letting God use our stories. Today, we find ourselves again. We relight our spark and let it light up the world. Stop SIS is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating on issues of trauma and trafficking, as well as the amazing power of the healing journey. Welcome to Stop SIS. Hey, you guys. Big welcome back to Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh. I am here with co-host Rachel Timothy, and we have a special guest today. In fact, our guest is an international speaker, but he used to be a former middle school youth director and the author of multiple resources for families and churches, including Parenting the Internet Generation, Exposed, Breaking the Silence, and Ready, How to Heal and Protect Your Family and Ministry from Pornography. His 2019 U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee testimony was the catalyst for the new federal and state online child protection legislation and earned PI, which stands for the, you'll have to let us know what that stands for.
Protect Young Eyes.
Oh yeah, earned Protect Young Eyes. Okay, the Dignity Defense Alert Award in 2020. And so Protect Young Eyes team performs hundreds of presentations at schools, churches, and nonprofits, receives over 1 million visits to their popular website annually, and was featured in the Childhood 2.0 movie. He and his wife, Andrea, enjoy family road trips, nature, running, candy, and he's the father to 4 children. So Protect Young Eyes truly is a hub for families, churches, and communities alike to protect children from pornography and being exploited. So big Stop SIS welcome to founder Chris McKenna.
Thank you, Denise and Rachel. It's really nice to see you both here. And, Denise, we connect in other ways here in the community, but Rachel, it's wonderful to meet you for the first time here. So
yeah, it's great to meet you. I'm so glad you're on.
So yeah, that was a lot to say. And I'm sure people are like, wait, what happens? What did they do? Tell me more. So I'd love to hear a bit about your story and how Protect Young Eyes was started.
So going all the way back, and this is where I'd invite people, if you can, go to YouTube and watch Childhood 2.0. It's free. And it was a documentary I did back in 2020 with a number of other advocates, but particularly Bark, the parental control software, which may come up from time to time in this conversation anyway, as a solution for families, among others. But I tell my story. I was exposed to pornography at a very young age, but generationally, that's important to keep in mind. So I was exposed to what we'll call analog porn, right? 2-dimensional, the porn you had to go find. I found a number of magazines that as an 8-year-old boy created a lot of confused curiosity. I didn't really know how to process it. So then right in college, the internet comes along, and that, like gasoline to a fire, gave birth to all kinds of now access and anonymity and affordability to porn that the world had never seen. And so I brought all of that sort of baggage as an adult who consumed pornography to a realization one day during a run. I could point to the spot where I was at here in Grand Rapids, where I just knew I had to come clean and quit. And I told Andrea, this was, 10, 15, it's probably about 14 or 15 years ago now. So I come from a background that understands what, to some extent, at least in my context, like how certain content and experiences can radically shape the direction of your life, especially as a child. There are so many things that I think we underestimate as children, because we have this idea that kids are resilient, which is totally untrue. Kids are just really adaptive and they roll with things, but trauma is trauma, and we all experience certain traumas and carry those with us. But for me, it was that trauma of an early childhood exposure. All right, now fast forward. I'm now a junior high youth pastor from 2009 to 2016. And I've already come clean about this. I'm using Covenant Eyes. I'm in an accountability group, and I'm just sort of walking that recovery journey. And now I'm watching parents put smartphones in the pockets of children, and we start carrying the internet with us as humans for the very first time. And to me, that was just a massive risk in the pockets of kids. Before I was in ministry, I was full-time in business. So I was a risk advisor for businesses, Denise and Rachel. That was what I did. I would go into large publicly traded companies. I would identify business risk and help them put processes in place to mitigate it. I did that for 12 years. So now I go into ministry and I'm watching parents drop risk into their pockets of their children. And I'm going, wait a minute. If I ended up being a compulsive consumer of pornography in an age of two-dimensional magazine-like, Cinemax-like, VHS-like porn, what chance do these awesome 11, 12, and 13-year-old boys and girls have against this insidious problem? And that just led to some research, that led to a closed Facebook group, that led to a big news story here in 2015 about a girl who was almost kidnapped through the Kick app here in Holland, Michigan. And then people started coming to me asking questions. Wow. And, that just one thing led to another. We launched a website. Now here we are 7, years later. So this was, I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. This was never my intent, but I saw a problem and felt this just burning desire to solve it, to fix it. I've just always had this desire to protect childhood, maybe out of a reaction to the trauma that I experienced. Now I have this insane energy towards wanting to prevent that from happening. And so protect young eyes now through presentations, through all kinds of research, but then advocacy at the state and federal level is what we're doing to put action to that. So there you go.
And I know that you speak at schools, you speak at churches, you speak to parents. What do you do with the federal and state? It says what have you been able to accomplish or change or shift in the eyes of the government?
Well, that is daily a very interesting thing that we do here. And again, I never expected to be in politics, but I was chosen by the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2019 to testify as the part of really one of the first hearings around online child safety that had occurred for a number of years. And I testified along with NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, an attorney general, a professor from a local university. And we started this conversation there at the federal level. And there have been a number of hearings since then. We've seen some of them, right? TikTok has been a part of these hearings now. The Instagram CEO, Adam Mosseri has been a part of these hearings now. And I think we're finally starting to see maybe a little bit of a tipping point. But where I have found more nimble ability to affect change is at the state level, right? State governments, because there are so few places at the federal government level where we can get people to agree on much. Now, child protection is one of the few sacred bipartisan places when it comes to child sexual abuse material, CSAM, which we used to call child pornography. That is one spot that we can still reach across the aisle. But now it gets messy with privacy and encryption and First Amendment and all these other issues that at the federal level has been a bit of a challenge. Now, I'm not giving up at the federal level because we are now 24 years removed from the most recent bill back in 1999 that actually did a significant job protecting children online. It's mind-blowing to think as a country that it's been 24 years since we've passed anything of significance at the federal level to protect children online, but that's where we are. So even just today, I was advising on a press release in a state where we're trying to pass legislation to force manufacturers to turn device filters on, right? I mean, Denise and Rachel, imagine when you buy an iPhone that the moment you turned it on, based on your age, because devices almost always know our age based on a Gmail address or an Apple ID, that it automatically enabled filters, right? We should have to hunt and choose to be exploited. We shouldn't have to hunt and choose to be protected in the digital world. And I always am supporting legislation that moves towards that more default protective posture for devices that are used by children. So that's what we work on right now at the federal level, a lot of device filtering legislation. So
It's fascinating because you're right. It seems like that shouldn't even be a debate.
it should be the easiest thing, right?
Right.
It's all about the money, unfortunately. They
It
could
is.
care less about what's going in those kids' mind, which makes me sick. But it is. They would lose money if you did that. And I guarantee some people are going to stop it for that reason. Not to be a Debbie Downer, but
No, they do. The tech lobby there are specific lobbyists that travel state to state debating me specifically to kill child safety bills for no other reason other than the fact that they are highly paid lobbyists by manufacturers, Apple, Google, Amazon, the like, that are literally paid to travel state to state to kill legislation. That's their job.
Wow. And so you see the same people consistently that
Yes.
have then built relationships with those Senate leaders and people who are voting and that kind of thing.
That's right. Yep, absolutely.
Has there been any major wins over the past few years as this conversation continues to ramp up?
Yeah, so we have passed device filtering legislation in Utah. We are now pushing in other states. We're working heavily right now in Alabama. We have big plans in multiple states. Many sessions. This past session season is mostly over. And this was where we were in Idaho, Montana, and other places, just getting a sense as to what the appetite was for this. We've learned a lot. And we're going to go to bat again, 8 other states come next year to try to get more of these across the line. Like you said, it seems like common sense. The big question isn't, well, can they do it? We all know these manufacturers can do it. The big question is, why haven't we done it already? Right? The default posture for anything in the physical world, when we know children are using it, is always the safest version of it. That's not true in the digital world. That's all we're asking.
you're right.
Wow. So can parents get involved when they know you're like advocating in their state? Like, when's Michigan's turn, right? We'll come behind you.
Yeah. No, I do have a contact in the House of Representatives, a friend of mine who actually used to do some work with me at Protect Young Eyes. And we're just, again, it's a lot of trying to find where the warm doors are, a lot of relationship building behind the scenes. Most of what causes bills to live or to die isn't what happens on the floor. It's what happens behind the door, right? It's what happens in the conversations and the relationships. And so trying to build some of that in Michigan, to be perfectly honest, it's slightly easier to pass this kind of legislation in states that have a Republican governor, just being honest. And so some of that is in play here too, that we're just trying to figure out in Michigan, where are the common points of agreement on things so that we can get something through. But to your question on how can families get involved, that's right. So if you follow us, whether it's through our social networks, I know, Rachel, that's how you and I connected, right? Was through something like social media. And we're often seeing what we're doing, where they could write letters. There are often easy tools where they can just click, here's my address and my zip code. It automatically will send a note to your state senator or representative so they know what you're in favor of. Those are great things. And I think what people often don't even realize is that it's really easy to talk to our legislatures. Like, I think many times we believe that there's this sort of curtain between us, that you have to be somebody special. At the end of the day, all senators, all representatives at the state and the federal level, if they're in their office, they talk to you. Like when I go to Washington, D.C., I'll stop in and see if Senator Stabenow or Senator Peters are around. And if not, I'll talk to one of their staff. You can just walk in. And they all have hours. They all have town hall meetings. And so wherever you happen to live, whatever state you're in, do a simple Google search. Who is my state senator? Who is my state representative? Go to their website. They have office hours. Just drop in. They want to hear from their constituents. And we all have a right and an ability to go and do that. And I just don't think we realize that.
Yeah. Well, the lobbyists do, right? They're
They
the
do.
ones that are stopping in. They're the ones that are
They
building
are.
relationships. And
Absolutely.
it's powerful for us to understand that we have that power too, or that ability to communicate.
Definitely.
So have you seen a shift over the years?
I think what's so complicated today in raising children, whether you're a parent, grandparent, or caring adult, is when I was growing up, there were very distinct lines between spots in the world that were good for me and spots in the world that were bad for me. I had to go somewhere, have a plan, have specific friends. I almost needed to be strategic if I was going to change the direction of my life, especially because I lived in a small town. Everybody talked to everybody and you couldn't get away with anything, right? But I think what's different today is if you're a child, the things that are horrible for you often coexist in the same places where you're asked to do good things. It's mixed content everywhere. So here's this Chromebook that I'm expecting you to do schoolwork on, which is a good and honorable thing. Yet here's this Chromebook that can take you to the worst pornography imaginable that I couldn't even get to in an analog childhood, right? Here's a phone that I want to use to keep in touch with you because I'm concerned as a parent today because I believe all the news that everything is horrible. And yet here's a device that 100 million people now have access to your life and can interact with you in all kinds of different ways from all over the world, right? And so I think it's difficult today because not only is it hard for us to parent where it's all of these sort of good and bad things all in the same place, but gosh, that's a hard spot to be a kid. It's a pressure spot to be a kid. We drop children in all kinds of digital spaces that were never designed for them, that were never created with kids in mind. And they have kid brains with kid decision-making processes. And then they make decisions like kids, and we get mad at them in a spot that was never designed for them in the first place. I mean, it's almost madness when you think about it. I'll say to audiences of parents all the time, we should never be surprised when a tween or a teen makes a mistake in Snapchat. Like that should never surprise us. That app was never designed for their brain and their inability to not dopamine driven jump after exciting things. We love that about teens. It causes them to take chances and explore the world and experience. But when it's in the form of a DM from someone trying to convince you to send a nude photo because they're going to send one back, and that sextortion kind of exchange is so, we shouldn't be surprised when we drop kids in those places and they make those choices, because the 14-year-old version of all of us back in the 80s would have done the exact same thing. So I think the first thing I want parents and caregivers to realize is let's level up our empathy for what it's like to grow up today. And let's have a greater respect for how difficult it is for children to consistently make good, honorable choices inside of digital spaces that were never designed for them in the first place. And I think if we start there, it helps us approach them with a little more care, a little more understanding. We can build bridges of digital trust with our children so they'll actually share and talk to us about things that they are experiencing online, instead of it always being an us versus them kind of exchange when it comes to technology. I want as many of our children as possible to know they can land safely and softly with us. Why? Because it's me with you, not me against you.
I think that's a fascinating conversation because, Rachel, you've had issues with your daughters where they come to you and there's a chat feature in these kid games. And these chat features are, you know, her child will come to her and she'll show her. So then what happens? We take away a device. And so then the child doesn't want to share what's happening because they're getting in trouble for this conversation that just started or whatever. So it's an interesting conversation to say, how can we protect our kids without it, without them feeling like they're the target, if they're, you know, that they're going to get in trouble if they're starting to be groomed in a way.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel, I'd love to know kind of how you've navigated some of those conversations. I don't think there's one perfect way, right? Every parent and child relationship is a little bit different. But Denise, I tend to believe that sometimes we need to say to our kids the things that we're thinking in that situation. Meaning the exact same thing that you just said around, oh boy, it's so difficult because we don't want them to feel like, I want our kids to hear that.
Right.
Like, to create this authentic sort of connection to go, honey, I don't know the best way to do this. I bet from time to time you feel like I am totally controlling and overbearing when it comes to this stuff. Is that true? Yeah, Ma, that's true. Yeah, Dad, that's true. Okay. Okay, good. I'll try. Be honest and tell me when that happens. Please know that my motivation behind doing that is because I put this in your hands. I don't understand. Like, I just want us to do whatever we can to be open and honest. What I say to parents is whatever you're afraid of when it comes to technology, tell your children those things. Don't let your fears dictate how you parent in the digital age, because kids will figure that out and then they become little digital ninjas and they'll try to hide things from you. Instead, be open and honest about those fears, about those uncertainties, about the things you don't know how to control, and put them out in the light where they have less control over the relationship, and then try to work on solutions together with your kid. And just be completely honest with them about the decisions that you're making, why you're making them. Don't spy on your kids, right? Don't spy on the things that they're doing online. Now, sometimes parents will say, well, Chris, are you saying I can't check my kid's phone? That's not what I said. I absolutely want them to know that you check their devices. That's a whole different posture than sneaking around and maybe they catch you spying and now you've ripped all digital trust away and now they're not going to tell you anything. But if they know from an early age that every internet connected device in your home is co-owned by you, whether they're 5, 10, or 15, right? Then they're not surprised when you're picking it up and taking a look from time to time. So I just think there's some things that we can do to set ourselves up for success, to create bridges of digital trust between us. And we've got a whole framework around that we do a whole presentation on that I'd be happy to provide a link for that parents could watch or learn from. We call it our digital trust framework, things that we've observed in families that get this right. They often do 5 things: copy, me, co-play, curiosity, conversation, and coaching. And we teach on all 5 of those phrases because they tend to produce children who learn how to use technology in a good and positive way.
Go ahead, Rachel. There's a car in front of our house, so I've got
Well, I was
crazy
just gonna
dogs.
say, my conversation with my daughter, like, it started off, well, obviously because of my background, there was just an intense fear as I'm reading some of the things that this guy said to her, knowing like she was in tears because she really just wanted to play the game. Like, she had no desire to have this conversation with this guy and what he was talking about. And so fear started to creep up in me. But eventually we were able to we cried together. My heart broke for her and I shared with her why, this is not something that her brain is able to process yet. Honestly, it's not something adults' brains are really supposed to process either, let alone a kid. But one of the neat things that came from all of it was her and I communicating better. We have conversations all the time about her devices, but she started to see a shift in herself. We were able to see how her attitude towards people when she was glued to a device more than she should have been was kind of raunchy compared to when she was just not worried about a device, not wanting to play it all the time. It changed her personality. And she's now more fun loving and just carefree, and she started to see it too. And now she's like, I don't really want anything to do with a device. It makes me just feel yucky.
I have a 6th grader and a 3rd grader, and they don't have phone numbers or social media or anything like that, but they have one of our old phones that has YouTube. And so they'll watch shorts. And one time, Eli was going to show us a short about like a cat, something silly. And when he went to swipe to show us the short, it said something about pornography. It was like a short about, and again, I immediately go, what are you listening to? What is that? Where did that come from? How does that just pop up? You know what I mean? And I think that's the fear as a parent, is that we can't control the device's random pop-ups all the time. And so the only thing we can control is the communication with our kids. And then the thing is, like, how deep do I go with them? Right now I just say,
no electronics, no Minecraft, no nothing after 9 p.m. Nothing good happens after 9 p.m. But how much do we tell them?
I want to explore a little bit two things that I just heard in the two examples, right? So Rachel, what I heard from you is something horrible, disturbing, hurtful happened to your daughter online. She came to you and the reaction made all the difference. So I think as parents, it's important for us to practice for tragedy. Imagine every single horrible thing that could happen to your child online and then write them down and then say them out loud, one on yourself in a mirror, and then say, I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to freak out. They need to know that it's okay, whether it's their fault or not. They need to know that it's okay. Oftentimes it's not, because Denise, what you just described, and I know this because right now here at PYE, I hope by the time people listen to this podcast, it'll be ready. We are creating a comprehensive guide to YouTube, like pages and pages. It is such a complicated, dumb app. Google makes it so hard for parents to protect their kids on YouTube. Shorts is one of those places. And what we've discovered in testing the 4 different content layers, whether it's a supervised account, whether it's restricted mode, whether it's explore more, all these different layers that you can apply to a Gmail account to make YouTube safer, you get different things in shorts. And even when you've applied those filters, YouTube still randomly puts things in. So one of the things, I just typed this in the blog post last night, is no matter what you see in your child's YouTube feed, don't freak out because it may not be them. Because I want them to know that no matter what happens, that they can land safely and softly with you. And so everybody listening to this, if you don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt that every child who you know and love and care for can land safely and softly with you, you have 48 hours from the moment you hear me say this to make sure that they do. Like, look at them and say, honey, most of the things that are going to happen to you online, I know are not your fault. And no matter what happens, because this technology is coming after us, whether you're 4, 14, or 40, you can land safely and softly with me. And we need to say that to them over and over again, because the moment something bad happens, there's this little lying voice that pops into kids' heads that go, am I going to get in trouble? And so we need to confront and squash that voice as often as possible through saying that they can land safely and softly with us, and then practicing it, giving it tangible practice. Like literally put a Chromebook, put an iPad, put whatever in front of a kid and say, all right, honey, here's what I want you to do. I am going to walk upstairs. I'm going to close my bedroom door. I want you to, when I say go, I want you to pretend that you saw something that scared you or made you uncomfortable online, or someone who you don't know tried to talk to you. And I want you to put it down, and I want you to come and tell me that it happened, okay? And you walk upstairs, you close the door, you yell through the closed door, go! And you make them actually physically do it so they know what to do in that moment. Because otherwise, it's just an abstract philosophy. And if you tell a kid, well, if you see porn, come and talk to me. Or if you tell a kid, if someone you don't know talks to you, come and talk to me. The moment it happens, that little voice will say, now? Wait, don't bother mom. She's busy. You're going to get in trouble. Are you sure? And 1,000 reasons not to tell you are going to pop into their head unless you've pushed through that with tangible practice. So those are the two maybe most valuable things I can offer to parents, particularly parents of elementary, like preschool and elementary school age. Tell them what you believe about it, right? They can land with you, and then show them exactly what that looks like and practice it, practice it, practice it.
When you think about it, you practice stop, drop, and roll how many times in your elementary school years, but we're not giving kids the automatic response for this. So when it happens, my guess is that there's a bit of that freeze, like, and then they don't really know what to do because it's not something that we're talking about.
That's right.
One of the ideas that I've had recently is, do you remember how back in the day you used to have, was it Book It? Or what was it, where you would read?
And, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and
Pizza
then you
Hut
get
was a part of it, I think.
Pizza Hut, exactly. After this incident happened with my daughter, her and I came up with something where we thought it would be really cool if with participating schools, churches, groups, whatever, if a kid were was brave enough to go to them and show them their phone, like, this is what was just sent to me, or this is what I just saw, then they would get a pizza, or they would get a reward, because that's brave and it's strong. Like, we are rewarding them being courageous, and it's giving them a chance to fight back against what they just saw and what was just done to them online.
I love that. I was highly motivated by the whole book it thing and getting those little cards and going to Pizza Hut and getting my little 6-inch pizza or whatever it was. So yeah, no, incentivize the behaviors that we want them to practice. I think that kind of incentivization, I don't know what the word is there, but I like it. So there you go.
Tell us about Bark, because I have started using it, but then I never finished it. And so I need to know what step to take next. I'm guessing, and this is what I think I did, is I started installing it on my son's Google account. Is that right? Tell me about how to use it and how it helps.
So Bark has a number of solutions, and it's one of the many tools. So, I mean, when we talk about software, software is effective at the device layer. So there are 5 layers of protection around kids: the relationship layer, the Wi-Fi layer for devices that depend on a Wi-Fi network, like Chromebooks, tablets, Xboxes, smart TVs, gaming stations, right? Then you have the device layer, because devices travel cellular, right? They use a cellular network and not a Wi-Fi network, right? Then we have the location layer. We keep devices out of certain places, like bedrooms, bathrooms, sleepovers, school buses, those sorts of places. And then the 5th one is apps. That's the other layer. You know, TikTok has some controls. They're okay. YouTube has some controls, but they're easy to toggle off. That's why it's the last layer, because it's the least dependable. All right. But in that device layer, that 3rd layer, we put software that travels with the device, no matter where it goes, whether it's your house, grandma's house, whether it's on Wi-Fi or cellular. That software manages that device in some way. Bark, Covenant Eyes, Screen Time, Family Link, right? Screen Time is free on Apple devices. It should be used on every Apple device, iPad, iPhone. Family Link is free on Android devices. It should be used on every Android tablet or phone. Covenant Eyes is great for accountability against pornography for older kids. Bark monitors social media and keywords, not just keywords, but it looks for context around conversations. They've trained an algorithm to identify patterns of communication that can be problematic, right, between kids, be it through texting, email, comments on some social media, depending on which ones they can monitor, or whether it's an Android or an iPhone. So based on what you've described, I bet there are some steps in setting it up that you haven't completed in order to make it more effective. And yeah, it does a really good job. They also have a Bark phone, right? So one of the things that we promote at Protect Young Eyes is delay is the way. That's our hashtag, delay is the way, right? I'm all about talk, text, and GPS, but no child in junior high needs portable internet. No child in junior high needs a smartphone or social media. It's just unnecessary. Trust me when I tell you, as a former junior high youth pastor, middle school has enough drama. It doesn't need any help. Denise, you're currently volunteering with 6th graders. You have one. You know what I mean, right? It doesn't need any complexity. Adolescence and hormones are doing enough. So we would promote kid-friendly devices like Gab or like the Bark phone that are actually crafted with kids in mind. Mind-blowing concept, right? So there's a couple of, I meandered around a little bit there, both with a couple of hardware solutions, right? Kid-friendly devices, but also software on devices, if you give them a straight up iPhone or a straight up Android, that can help make them safer.
Awesome. Yeah, I didn't even know Bark had its own phone, which is interesting to think about when the time comes that a phone number is needed. There's options where it's not a full-blown computer in your hand.
That's exactly right. They don't need supercomputers.
Right. What do you suggest that a parent do if they find these conversations? Like, can you report it to the police? Is there much that we can do, or is there really just like, what can we do with this information, you know?
It really has to be something pretty egregious for it to warrant the attention of the police. And it's not because they don't care. It's simply because there's so many of these incidents. They simply can't handle the volume. I know they care, and I have great relationships with ICAC units all over the country. That's Internet Crimes Against Children. There are task forces of police officers, federally funded, that investigate these kinds of crimes. But you have to imagine what happens. Not only are they receiving local calls from folks like us, but the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is the global clearinghouse for explicit sexually exploitive content of children online, is sorted at NCMEC, and then it's sent out to police agencies, both domestic and international. So they're also receiving all of that evidence to try to have to track down. I mean, every single day, our amazing men and women in law enforcement are looking at a screen of red dots, trying to figure out which one to go after today. It's just simply too much. They can't keep up, which isn't their fault. There's a lot of reasons why. We go back to some of the advocacy work, but it's mostly on parents to figure out what to do next, unfortunately. Now, if you find that your child is being sextorted, meaning that they are being extorted for finances because of threats related to a nude or indecent photo of a child that has been shared with somebody else, then get law enforcement involved. But if it's somebody who is clearly, a predator that is trying to groom your child by sending them pornography from some random Instagram account, law enforcement just simply isn't equipped. So you block the person, you immediately delete, depending on what it is. You might want a screenshot, and we have some of this explained on our blog post around my child was caught up in pornography or sexting. What do I do? Like, when do you take a screenshot? When do you not, right? When are you sort of perpetuating indecent content by having a screenshot of it yourself? Those are some tricky things to try to navigate. But just in general, you block it, right? You stop whatever access was providing the doorway to your child. So if it was Instagram, let's get Instagram out of the life of your child or whatever it is. And then you have some conversations about preventing it from happening in the future. And that's, right, some initial steps that parents can take tactically. Relationally, Rachel, I love your approach. There was a lot of real grace and understanding in what you experienced with your daughter, letting her know that, she really didn't do anything wrong here, that there shouldn't be any shame felt by her, giving her an open opportunity to kind of talk about it and share about it. Every family has to navigate that. We have tips on whether you're a faith-based family or not. What are some steps that you can take just to really invite different tools into that situation? But it's often up to parents to know exactly what to do. We created an app during COVID called the Protect app that people can find in the Apple App Store or Google Play. If you download it for free, there's an emergency section that has 4 sections around pornography, predators, mental health, or sexting, to kind of know what to do in each of those situations for that kind of initial sort of first responder kind of steps.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely check that out, you guys. I know your website, Protect Young Eyes, has a ton of different resources, including vlogs and videos and ideas that parents can use as a frontline person, but then also schools and teachers. And, there's a lot of community members working with kids who we all need to have our eyes opened, whether it's our child or not.
Yeah, and we do quite a bit of our work through schools. So we did 350 presentations in the past 12 months, all over the country, and even some internationally. And so if you have a school, private, public, charter, Catholic, evangelical, we have decks for all of them. And we speak K through 12. We break them up into K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. We do parent talks. I do full day teacher professional development and leadership sessions when it comes to whole dioceses or whole school systems of teachers. I've done many of those 4, 6, or 8-hour sessions just to level up staff understanding of these issues so they're better equipped in the classroom, better equipped in conversations with parents. So when it comes to that reaching out to your principals, reaching out to heads of school, please point them our direction. We have all the systems in place to support them. We evaluate policies, we evaluate their tech systems, we have in-class curriculum. We have a ton of resources for schools to increase their digital wellness.
That's another thing to think about, because you can have your Wi-Fi or your devices, but kids are going into other Wi-Fi systems. I know that there is at our school, there's a filter. So if something is searched, it doesn't pop up and it gets dinged to the principal's office, and they find out if kids are searching inappropriate things. And so I'm sure that's just one layer of protection that schools need, but you think of the filtering that they should and could have is important too.
I'll never forget when I was teaching and my students were doing a project, and one of them was going to do a project on Titanic. And so they typed in Titanic. You can imagine the picture that popped up on the school computer from the movie Titanic. I'm assuming you guys know what I'm talking about.
Kate Winslet and all her glory, right?
Yes. And just like that, I mean, like, how in the world does that get through?
Yeah.
But it does.
Yeah, and that's, so it's very important for a teacher in that situation, right? We teach teachers how to respond, right? So in the same way, we don't want parents to freak out when a child, that wasn't their fault. Again, we asked them to do something and the internet did this to them. They didn't do it to the internet. And do teachers respond with grace and understanding and calm all the way down to their facial expressions to let them know, hey, honey, I'm sorry that happened. All right, let's close that down. And just, there's a right and wrong way to handle that in the classroom. So that's a part of what we teach.
I was ticked at the school and the system and
Yeah.
All right, you guys, check out protectyoungeyes.com. I know you're on Facebook and Instagram, and it sounds like no matter where you are in the world, if you are interested in learning more yourself about how to protect your family or your school system or your church, if you're looking to increase the conversation, because at the end of the day, that's all we can control. We can't control the algorithms like we want to often. Like, there's things that we can do, but it feels like that open communication and that open dialogue is one of the first lines of defenses. Us having a relationship with our students or our kids and being able to talk about it, not hide it under the rug, but say, this is a problem and we want to make sure that you stay safe from this problem. And so, Chris, thank you for giving us the tools, the wisdom, the words to say. I know this is just the tip of the iceberg of the content that you guys have on your site. So we'll definitely continue to check it out ourselves and recommend everybody who's listening to check it out as well.
Thank you, Denise. And thank you, Rachel. And just, I can tell in the stories you've shared, you're doing great work and modeling many of the things that we believe at Protect Young Eyes. And I'm sure other parents will notice that too. So that's really important. So thank you for that.
All right, you guys, have an awesome, awesome week. And we'll see you next week. And thank you again, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.